Thunderwolves have been a staple in competitive Warhammer 40,000s lists and are probably one of the most recognizable units on the tabletop for Space Wolves. So what's the deal with these saddled canines and their Wolfguard jockeys? In this video, we'll take a brief look at the lore surrounding Thunderwolf Cavalry, a deep dive into their datasheet and abilities, loadout options, detachment synergies, and tactical considerations. Welcome to My Mini Grimdark. Thunderwolves are the largest subspecies of wolf on Fenris, dwelling amongst the hostile planet's northernmost peaks, the fabled Mountains of Maelstrom. The largest of these beasts grow to the size of Space Marine Rhino tanks, covered in thick, wire-like fur to guard them from the sub-zero conditions of their mountain home. Only the Space Wolves possess the appetite and constitution required to break a Thunderwolf, and even then, this is a perilous, often fatal venture. Notably, some companies like that of Harold Deathwolf see this deed as a vital part of initiation into the Wolf Lord's Wolfguard. In battle, the ferocity and unblinking tenacity in which the Thunderwolves strike is matched only by their Wolfguard riders. They are incredibly long-lived, and the Space Wolves afford them the same care after battle as one of their brothers. Should a wolf fall, the Iron Priests will augment them with bionic limbs and implants, enhancing their lethality further. Harold Deathwolf and his company of Deathwolves are known to field rank upon rank of Thunderwolf Cavalry. Harold himself sits atop the largest and most ferocious Thunderwolf of the chapter, the colossal beast known as Icetooth. Thunderwolf Cavalry are one of the Space Wolves' longer-serving units, with a datasheet and abilities that have ebbed and flowed over the editions. I'd argue from the outset now that this is a very functional unit, and Thunderwolf Cavalry serve an important and impactful role for Space Wolves, fun for casual games and an almost auto-take in successful tournament lists. We'll come back to this in a moment, though. Available in units of 3 to 6, Thunderwolf Cavalry hit the table with a pacey 12-inch movement, toughness 6, a 3+ save, 4 wounds, leadership 6+, and a genuinely useful OC2. The combination of quick movement and OCT is really handy for this unit. They can get forward on turn 1 and, if need be, have a good chance of being able to charge infiltrating, scouting, or opposing fast attack units to contest objectives. Even though they're often going to be outnumbered by model count, OC2 means that even a unit of 3 Thunderwolves doesn't necessarily need to wipe out the opposition to take the objective. By default, the unit loadouts with bolt pistols and Wolfguard weapons. 1 in 3 can swap the bolt pistol for a plasma pistol, and any number of Wolfguards can swap their bolt pistol for a bolt gun or storm shield. The bolt gun upgrades the pistol's range and gains an extra attack, but loses the pistol keyword for shooting whilst in engagement range. The plasma pistol profile should be familiar to you, but needless to say, it packs a nice punch at range 12 inches, and you're likely going to be able to get into range given the unit's pace. In theory, then, you could load out this unit for working at range, maybe if you plan to use them for secondaries. One of the problems you'll run into with Thunderwolves, though, which incidentally is a challenge for many mounted units in Warhammer 40,000, is base size. Those 60mm bases are cumbersome to navigate around units and terrain, so whilst the datasheet feels very mobile, having to move around ruins and walls is usually going to deter their ability to be a dedicated secondary unit. Then the range profile has its challenges too. Plasma pistol aside, the shooting for this unit lacks any AP, and with only 1 damage, it's only really going to be effective against light infantry. With only 2 attacks each and in what will be a relatively small unit, Thunderwolves aren't your best choice for taking out enemy chaff for this points cost. So, I'd argue in favor of ditching those pesky guns with Space Vikings riding wolves, right? Go with Storm Shields. If you do, your unit gains a 4+ invulnerable save to improve their durability against enemy attacks with AP and becomes a dedicated melee-focused shock attack unit. And in melee, even a unit of 3 Thunderwolf Cavalry can do solid damage. The Thunderwolves themselves, firstly, fighting with their teeth and claws for 3 attacks each, hitting on 4s, strength 5, AP -1, and damage 1. The jockeys then strike with their Wolfguard weapons for 4 attacks each, hitting on 3s, strength 5 again, AP -2, and damage 2. This is a solid melee profile, 12 attacks between them. If you and your opponent roll on the averages, your Wolfguard attacks are killing around 4 Tactica Space Marine equivalent models. You can then weigh in with your wolves, if there are any survivors after this, with toughness 6, 4 wounds each, and with that Storm Shield 4+ invulnerable save, the unit should withstand the hitback from average Joe Intercessor type units. On the charge, those Wolfguard weapons go from damage 2 to damage 3 to help them tear up multi-wound opponents, so they can hit. It's worth appreciating that they aren't necessarily going to shred through the opposition's army for themselves, and for 100 points for 3 or 220 points for 6, it's probably unfair to expect them to. What makes Thunderwolf Cavalry so playable isn't just their melee or durability alone, it's the combination of these with their speed that they bring to Space Wolves. There are no other units in Codex Supplement Space Wolves that can do what they do. Fenrisian Wolves are only the unit that can move as fast, but they don't have either the melee threat or the durability of Thunderwolf Cavalry. Wolfen with Storm Shields do have the durability that Thunderwolves have, and arguably have an even stronger melee profile, but they don't have the speed, pacey as they are. Codex Space Marines does have units available that could fulfill the role in a similar fashion in Assault Intercessors with Jump Packs or even Outriders, for example, but they don't tend to hit quite as hard in melee for the equivalent points, and of course, these non-Space Wolves units won't necessarily synergize with Space Wolves detachments in the same way if that's what you're going for. Thunderwolf Cavalry give you a fast, hard-hitting melee unit that can engage the opponent from the get-go. The durability means that unlike most infiltrating units or many other fast attack units, they will take a little bit more effort to get rid of them than normal, so Thunderwolves are excellent for helping your entire army with board control by locking up opposition units and screening the mid-table and beyond from deep strikes and reserves early in the game. This is why they find themselves in so many competitive lists, and this is why you often see units of these in multiples. Many opposition armies will have to expend time and effort to chew through those toughness 6 hides with their 4 wounds and 4+ invulnerable saves. If they attempt to and they aren't efficient at it, then your Thunderwolves will hold them up for your army to take a position behind them in the midboard. If the opponent directs bigger firepower or elites to the task, your other advancing units of Headtakers, Bloodclaws, Wolfen and company will be able to move forward with less attention afforded to them, so they'll take less damage and, in theory, be better positioned to win the mid-table for you. This kind of battlefield management can make the difference between winning and losing from a very early stage. Hypothetically, if you can hold your opponent inside their own third of the table, you'll have a really good chance of scoring bigger on objective control. There are no leadership options for Thunderwolf Cavalry as we currently have no Space Wolves characters on Wolves. No current representation for Harold or Icetooth, but wouldn't that be something? So let's take a look at detachments. Now, usually I just stick with the 3 core detachments from Codex Supplement Space Wolves for this, but since Saga of the Bold doesn't really offer the unit anything given their lack of leadership options, I'm going to sneak Stormlance Task Force into the equation along with Saga of the Hunter and Saga of the Beastslayer. Starting with Saga of the Hunter, and the first consideration is around the detachment buff. Unfortunately, in order to get +1 to hit and later a +1 to wound, they'd have to outnumber the foe. Most of the time, your unit's going to be smaller than that of the opponent in model count, so you'll be relying on second unit support in order to get this buff. In theory, your Thunderwolves could be accompanied by a Fenrisian Wolf unit specifically for the task, or could tag team an enemy unit, but this does feel a little bit awkward for a unit that wants to sprint ahead of your army and cause mayhem. Of the stratagems, there are a couple of great ones for Thunderwolf Cavalry. Territorial advantage allows them to leave an objective they hold and maintain control of it. You could grab the mid-table objective turn 1, then spend a CP on turn 2 and head out to attack and hold up the enemy, but keep objective control while the rest of your force follows up. Chosen Prey for a CP for fallback and charge is great for reactivating your native charge buff. Saga of the Beastslayer has established itself as a go-to for Space Wolves player, and for good reason. It's thematic, synergizes well with Space Wolves units in particular, but keeps the door wide open for Codex Space Marines units too. Thunderwolf Cavalry will enjoy everything about this in Detachment too. They put out a lot of attacks, so lethal hits just adds to their overall effectiveness in combat. On top of that, you've got access to some great stratagems here. +1 to wound from Unbridled Ferocity for a CP is massive, particularly for those Wolfguard weapons. This will really increase their output against most foes, and is likely going to get them to 2s for wounding most infantry units. Additionally, recalling the mobility challenges that mounted units sometimes have with terrain and other models, Shock Cavalry for CP isn't necessarily exciting as stratagems go, but it can be game-changing situationally. It allows the unit to pass through other units that are non-titanic and terrain less than 4 inches tall. Big for bursting up the battlefield into contact, or whipping around the flank to take an objective or complete a secondary with their big movement. Lastly, Thunderous Pursuit remains one of my favourite stratagems. Being able to move 6 inches when an enemy moves within 9 inches is very useful for a CP. Use this to get your Thunderwolves out of charge range to keep them on the front foot, or screen enemy units so that they've got no choice but to charge your Thunderwolves in place of one of your other units. Excellent for board control and playing the exchange game. Finally, Stormlance Task Force. Another very popular detachment in competitive play for Space Wolves, when you consider that the detachment rule grants every unit advance and charge, even before stratagems are considered, Space Wolves are going to be at home. For Thunderwolf Cavalry, advance and charge enhances their already long threat range, and if they need a bit more, the stratagem Full Throttle gives the unit an automatic 9-inch advance for 2 CP. That means the unit can move 21 inches before charging. Even on dense terrain tables, they should be able to reach a foe almost anywhere on the battlefield with this, when the need calls for it. Alternatively, Thunderwolves can also enjoy the Lance trait for just 1 CP and get +1 to wound on the charge. That's pretty big when you consider they're already getting +1 damage on the charge from their native ability. You can start spoiling the day of tougher infantry at this stage. You've then got a reactive move in Wind Swift Evasion, see Thunderous Pursuit above, or Ride Hard, Ride Fast for a CP, for -1 to be wounded. With toughness 6 already, this could push attacks to 6 to wound and go a long way to keeping your unit alive to tie up the enemy unit for another turn. I reviewed the lists in a separate video. There'll be a button hovering somewhere for this. Check it out if you want more information, but a recent first place list ran 3 Thunderwolf Cavalry units in a ferocious Stormlance task force list, if you're curious about how this might work. As for the sculpts, well, this is where things will unravel a little for me. This is really subjective, so you can ignore me if you happen to like them, but the current miniatures miss the mark for me. Firstly, the riders are supposed to be Wolfguard, veterans and elite soldiers of the chapter. Honestly, they just look like vaguely Space Wolvie Marines painted grey. They should be draped in furs and ornaments. It should also be noted that they're from the older kits, and as such, they're firstborn. So this lot are a little jockey-esque in comparison to the glorious new Primaris scale sculpts. Secondly, the wolves are okay, but really lack the ferocity and grimdark feel they could convey. I love the new wolves within the Gloomspite Gitz Age of Sigmar force, for example. Their leader character in particular looks fantastic. And remember, Thunderwolves are supposed to be huge, some as big as tanks. There's a lot of potential in this kit, and the old one is just too reserved, and too literally just a bunch of Space Marines crushing some biggish wolves. Along with Wolfen, I'm hoping Thunderwolves will get an updated kit in 11th edition. It feels like a realistic ask, given how popular they are as a unit on the table. Thunderwolf Cavalry are a great unit for Space Wolves. When you consider the role that they play, their datasheet, they're one of the most impactful units in competitive play, and they'll continue to get played on the circuit. They're fun too, but a unit in your army can be satisfying in any detachment to go after the enemy quickly. They're a great unit in all forms of play, and they bring something to Space Wolves that they just can't get as good anywhere else. Thanks for watching. Keep hobbying.